My name is Patricia, but people call me Trish, and I'm 61 years old. I never thought the end of my life might come in a sterile white room with strangers hovering over me, ready to carve into my body. The lights above me were so bright I could barely keep my eyes open, and yet I couldn't close them either. The weight of the moment pressed me flat against the cold steel of the operating table. A nurse adjusted the strap on my wrist. Another placed the mask just inches from my face. I could hear the beeping of the heart monitor, steady and merciless, like a drumbeat counting down. This was it. My kidney was about to be taken to save my son. Through the glass wall, I saw her, Rebecca, my daughter-in-law, arms folded, whispering to her parents. Her eyes never left me. Sharp, calculating, as if she was willing me to surrender, to sign away more than just my body. The anesthetist leaned in, his voice calm but distant. "Breathe slowly, Patricia." And then it happened. The doors burst open. Small footsteps pounded the floor. My grandson's voice, desperate and piercing. "Grandma." "Don't do it," Dad lied. The room froze. The mask hovered above me. My heart leapt into my throat. My whole body turned to ice. If you're listening to me right now, I want you to know why I almost gave my life away for a lie. Before we continue, tell me, where are you watching from today? Drop it in the comments. If stories like this one resonate with you, hit subscribe. I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind where people still wave at each other when they walk their dogs or carry shopping bags up the drive. My home isn't grand, but it's mine, and after years of raising a son alone, it has become my sanctuary. The garden at the front is filled with lavender bushes, and in the spring the air smells sweet when you open the windows. Inside, the walls are lined with photographs, memories frozen in time, some joyful, some bittersweet. Sundays have always been sacred in my world. It was a tradition I kept alive from my own childhood. Sunday dinners, everyone gathered around the table, plates filled with roast chicken, potatoes crisp just right, and my apple pie cooling on the counter. David used to love helping me peel apples when he was younger, but these days he arrives late, often distracted, phone buzzing at his side. Rebecca insists we start without him, her tone sharp, always managing to sound like she's in charge of the room even though it's my home. Rebecca is my daughter-in-law, but she's never felt like family. Her smiles don't reach her eyes, and every word from her mouth feels measured, deliberate. She corrects Ethan if he interrupts. She comments on how much salt I use, and she always steers the conversation back to David, his work, his future, his needs. Ethan is my light. He's only 9, full of energy and questions, and he often sneaks into the kitchen while I'm cooking to pinch a carrot stick or tell me about his latest school project. His innocence is a comfort, even when I can see the way he hesitates under Rebecca's gaze. He looks at me sometimes as if he wants to say more, as if he trusts me with something too heavy for his small shoulders. When I look at Ethan, I see David as a boy. There's one photograph in particular that I keep on the mantelpiece. David is maybe 7 years old, standing in the garden with his hair sticking out in all directions, holding up a paper kite he'd made. His grin was so wide that day, his eyes filled with hope. That photo has always been a reminder of the bond between us, of how much he relied on me after his father died. I used to tell myself that no matter what happened, David and I would always have each other. The locket around my neck is another reminder of the past. My late husband gave it to me on our 10th anniversary, just months before he passed unexpectedly. Inside is a tiny picture of the 3 of us together, him, me, and little David. That locket has never left my side. It isn't just jewelry, it's a piece of truth, a symbol of the love and stability I once had, and the promise I made to carry on for our son. Being a single mother wasn't easy. I worked long hours at the post office, stood on my feet until they ached, came home to cook, clean, and help David with homework. I missed out on nights out with friends, holidays I couldn't afford, even simple luxuries like new clothes. Everything I did was for him. I wanted to give him a chance at a future, and for years I thought it had paid off. He got a job, married, had a son of his own. But lately I've wondered whether I gave too much, whether I let sacrifice blur the lines of responsibility. Tucked away in a drawer in my bedroom are my will papers. I updated them last year after a scare with my blood pressure. My house, my savings, even a locket. Everything carefully listed. It's not a fortune, but it's all I have to give. Rebecca noticed the envelope once when she came looking for scissors, and she lingered on it too long. It's good to have things organized, she said, but the way her eyes narrowed made me uneasy. Since then, I've felt her subtle questions about my affairs, about what Ethan might inherit one day, about whether David could take over certain responsibilities. Those dinners, which used to be filled with laughter, now carry an undercurrent of tension. Rebecca speaks in a way that makes me feel like an outsider in my own home. She praises David constantly, almost rehearsed, as if reminding everyone of his importance. And David? Well, he lets her. He nods, he agrees, he sits quietly while she dictates the rhythm of the evening. It's as if my son has become a guest at my table too, and that realization cuts me deeply. Still, I kept baking the pies. I kept setting the table, lighting the candles, pouring the wine. Because that's what mothers do, isn't it? We keep traditions alive even when no one else seems to care, because it's the glue that holds the family together. Yet in those small cracks, Rebecca's sharp glances, David's silence, Ethan's nervous pauses, I felt something shifting. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I knew the balance of love and loyalty in my family was changing. I told myself it was just modern life, that maybe I was old-fashioned, too sensitive. But deep down, there was a heaviness I couldn't shake, like storm clouds gathering before the rain. And so, in my ordinary routines, shopping for groceries at the local market, exchanging pleasantries with the butcher, kneading dough for bread, I carried that unease with me. It was always there, tucked behind the smile I gave the neighbors, resting in the quiet moments when I clasped the locket in my hand before bed. I didn't know then that those subtle signs, those whispered suspicions, would grow into something much darker. I only knew that I loved my son and that I would do anything to protect him. Anything. And that belief, that blind devotion, was the very thing that would nearly cost me my life. It happened on a Sunday, as so many turning points in my life seemed to. The table was set, candles lit, and the apple pie cooling by the window. David had come straight from work, looking tired, but I thought little of it at first. He picked at his food more than usual, pushing the potatoes around his plate, eyes shadowed with something I couldn't quite place. Then, without warning, he slumped forward, his fork clattering against the plate. For a moment, I thought he'd only fainted, but the way his body sagged, the color draining from his face, it was more than exhaustion. My heart lurched. "David," I shouted, rushing to his side. Ethan began to cry, clutching at his father's sleeve, while Rebecca was already on her phone calling an ambulance. The room blurred into sirens, flashing lights, the heavy slam of ambulance doors. I rode in the back with him, gripping his hand, whispering his name like a prayer. At the hospital, after endless tests, a doctor finally emerged. His voice was calm but firm. "Kidney failure. He'll need a transplant." The words hit me like a blow. I felt the room tilt, my breath caught in my throat. Before I could process, Rebecca stepped forward, sharp and decisive. "His mother will do it. She has to. It's her duty." Her eyes flicked toward me, not with hope, but with command. Duty. The words sank deep, heavy as lead. I stared at David, pale against the white sheets, tubes snaking from his arms, and all I could think of was that photograph of him as a boy with his kite. My little boy, who I had raised alone, who I had sacrificed everything for. How could I refuse him now? The doctors moved quickly, arranging compatibility tests, explaining timelines. Rebecca hovered constantly, intercepting questions, pressing for answers. She seemed almost eager, as though she had been waiting for this moment. I told myself it was just worry, that she wanted the best for David, but something in her tone unsettled me. "You'll be fine, Patricia," she said briskly, signing forms as if they were hers to sign. "It's a routine procedure these days. You'll bounce back. What matters is saving David." Her words tightened around my chest. I nodded, though inside I trembled. Fear, yes, but also guilt. Memories rose unbidden. David's scraped knees when he was 7, his nervous smile on his first day at secondary school, the way he'd leaned against me at his father's funeral. He had always needed me. And hadn't I promised I would always be there? That night, back at home, I sat at the kitchen table long after midnight, staring at the locket in my hands. I wanted to believe this was simple, a mother saving her son, but doubts crept in, subtle and insistent. Rebecca's urgency, the way she dominated every conversation with doctors, the way David avoided my eyes when she spoke for him. It was Ethan who broke the silence. I heard the creak of the stairs and found him standing in the doorway, his face pale in the dim light. "Grandma," he whispered, "they were fighting." I pulled him close, smoothing his hair. "What do you mean, love?" He looked down, twisting his fingers together. "Mom and Dad." "She was yelling. She said you had to do it, or everything would be ruined." Dad didn't say anything. He just sat there. My stomach knotted. I wanted to ask more, but Ethan shook his head, frightened, retreating back upstairs before I could press him. I sat there alone, the locket warm in my palm, torn between unease and devotion. Something wasn't right. I could feel it in my bones. But when I thought of David, lying weak in that hospital bed, I knew my answer. I would do it. I would give him my kidney. Because love, I told myself, leaves no room for doubt. The first cracks appeared in the paperwork. A week after David's diagnosis, the hospital sent letters confirming his condition and outlining the next steps. I sat at my kitchen table, glasses perched on the end of my nose, reading line by line. Some of the details didn't add up. David had told me both kidneys were failing rapidly, the time was running out. But the consultant's letter mentioned progressive decline, not immediate crisis. It recommended lifestyle adjustments alongside a transplant evaluation, which was very different from the way Rebecca had described it. I tried to brush it off. Maybe I misunderstood the medical language. Maybe Rebecca was simplifying things for me. But the unease stayed. The following evening, Rebecca brought me more forms. "We just need your signature here, Patricia," she said, sliding them across the table with that clipped tone of hers. I scanned the pages. Most were medical consents, but tucked in between was something that didn't belong, an insurance-related document full of numbers and clauses. "What's this one?" I asked, pointing. "Oh, it's just routine," she replied too quickly, reaching to turn the page. "Don't worry yourself." Her hand brushed mine as she tried to move the papers along, and I felt my skin prickle. My instincts told me this wasn't routine at all. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, fingers clutching the locket around my neck. My late husband's face smiled up at me from inside, steady and true. "Help me see clearly," I whispered into the darkness, wishing he were still here to give me advice. The next day, while dropping off groceries at David and Rebecca's house, I heard her voice through the half-open kitchen door, sharp, low, deliberate. "Yes, it's all in motion. Once everything's signed over, we'll be secure. He's too weak to fight it, and she'll do it. She always does." I froze, my chest tightened, ears straining. The clink of her glass, the shuffle of papers. She laughed softly, the sound of someone who already believed they'd won. I backed away before she spotted me, heart pounding. Signed over? What could she mean? When I saw Ethan that afternoon, his face looked pale, his shoulders hunched. He sat at the kitchen table with a half-finished puzzle. "You all right, love?" I asked, brushing his hair from his eyes. He nodded too fast. "I'm fine." But his little fingers twisted the puzzle piece over and over, not placing it. His eyes darted to the hallway where Rebecca's voice still echoed faintly. "Grandma," he started, then stopped, pressing his lips together tight. "What is it, sweetheart?" He shook his head, eyes brimming. "Nothing." "I can't." He scrambled down from the chair and ran upstairs. I sat there, staring at the unfinished puzzle, wondering what pieces he was holding back. By then, doubt had rooted itself deep inside me. Love battled with suspicion. Each time I looked at David, weak and drawn in his hospital bed, I wanted to believe he was innocent, that it was only Rebecca weaving webs around him. But then I'd remember the letters, the phone call, the way he avoided my eyes when paperwork was mentioned. The tipping point came one rainy afternoon when I stopped by to bring clean clothes for David. Rebecca wasn't home, and Ethan was upstairs doing homework. The house was quiet, too quiet. My gaze landed on the small desk in the corner of the living room. A pile of envelopes and papers spilled out of the drawer, edges curling. I told myself not to look. It wasn't my business, but something stronger than fear pushed me forward. I opened the drawer. Bills, overdue notices, letters from banks. And then loan papers. Several of them, unsigned but stamped with urgent red dates. Tens of thousands owed. My stomach lurched. This wasn't just medical stress. This was financial collapse. I pressed my hand against the papers, as if the touch could somehow make sense of them. But the truth was plain. David and Rebecca were drowning in debt, and the timing of all this suddenly seemed less like tragedy and more like design. I heard a creak on the stairs. Ethan stood halfway down, his eyes wide. "Grandma," he whispered, glancing toward the door, "please don't tell Mum I saw you." I folded the papers back into the drawer quickly, my face burning with guilt. "It's all right, love. It's our secret." He nodded, lips pressed tight again, and disappeared back upstairs. That night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the locket clutched so hard in my hand the chain cut into my skin. My heart ached with conflict. Was my son complicit in this, or was he too sick, too lost, letting Rebecca handle everything? I remembered him as a boy, running home from school with scraped knees, needing me to fix everything. I remembered the way he cried into my shoulder the night we buried his father, telling me, "Don't leave me, Mum. You're all I have." And here I was, decades later, facing the same plea in different words. Only now, it was tangled in lies and shadows. Love demanded I save him, but the whispers of betrayal grew louder in my mind. The bills, the insurance, the rushed surgery, Rebecca's phone call, Ethan's frightened eyes. I pressed the locket to my lips. "Tell me what to do," I begged the memory of my husband, but no answer came, only the steady tick of the clock in the dark. I was alone with the question, was I about to give my life for love or for a lie? It was Ethan who broke first. We were sitting in my kitchen, the scent of apple pie still warm in the air. He picked at the crust on his plate, crumbling it into pieces without eating. His little shoulders slumped as though he was carrying something far heavier than a 9-year-old should. "Grandma," he whispered, eyes fixed on the crumbs. "Can I tell you something? But you can't say it was me." My heart stuttered. I leaned closer, lowering my voice to match his. "Of course, love. You can always tell me anything." He twisted his fingers together, cheeks flushed. "Daddy, he doesn't need your kidney yet." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. For a moment I couldn't breathe. "What do you mean?" "That night I couldn't sleep," he said, his voice trembling. I heard Mum on the phone. She was angry. She said, "The doctor only said it might be needed later, but if we wait too long we'll lose the chance. Once your mum's done, we'll have the deed safe." I froze, the locket at my throat suddenly heavy as a stone. The deed safe. My mind spun back to the drawer, the unsigned loans, Rebecca's sharp words about getting everything signed over. "Are you sure you heard right, Ethan?" I asked softly, though my voice shook. He nodded hard, eyes glistening. "I know what I heard. But please don't tell Mum, she'll be really mad. She says Daddy's too tired to deal with stuff and that she has to protect us, but it doesn't feel right." I reached for his hand. His little fingers clung to mine, desperate. "Thank you for trusting me, sweetheart." I won't say anything, not yet. Inside, though, my chest felt like it was caving in. The urgency, the reason Rebecca had given me no time to think, wasn't real. David might be ill, yes, but the surgery wasn't the only hope, not now, not immediately. And yet Rebecca was pressing so hard it felt like suffocation. That night, after Ethan had gone home, I sat alone in the living room with the family photo of David as a boy propped against the lamp. His gap-toothed grin stared back at me, innocent and bright. How could I accuse him of being part of this? How could I believe he would let his wife use my love as leverage? But the seeds of doubt had taken root. Rebecca was manipulating us all. That much I was certain of now. The question that kept me awake wasn't about her anymore. It was about him. Did David know? Was he too weak, too weary, letting her pull the strings while he looked the other way? Or was he complicit, quietly agreeing to sacrifice me so they could survive their debts? I replayed Ethan's words over and over. Daddy doesn't need the kidney yet. That yet was a blade in my chest. She turned a medical warning into an emergency, all to rush me into compliance. I pressed the locket to my lips, whispering into the silence, "Is this what love demands of me? Or am I walking into betrayal?" Sleep didn't come. Only the sharp tick of the clock and the echo of Ethan's frightened voice. For the first time, I wasn't sure saving my son was the same as saving my family. The days after Ethan's confession passed in a blur of dread. Every morning I woke with the weight of his words pressing down on my chest, and every night I lay awake staring at the ceiling, clutching my locket until dawn. Rebecca, meanwhile, was tireless. She prowled the hospital corridors like a general commanding a war. Every time I saw her, she had a clipboard in hand, papers neatly stacked, voice sharp with authority. "We've spoken with the doctors," she told me one afternoon, cornering me in David's hospital room. "They can move the surgery up. There's no sense in delaying. You're compatible, Patricia, and the sooner it's done, the better." I opened my mouth to ask questions about risks, about necessity, about time, but she cut me off. "Don't start second-guessing. You're his mother. Do you want him to die while you sit around worrying about paperwork?" Her words landed like blows. I glanced at David, hoping for comfort, for some sign of reassurance. But he wouldn't meet my eyes. He stared at the window instead, pale and silent, as though the weight of Rebecca's words pressed on him too. That night, she found me alone in the hospital cafeteria, her tone harder than ever. "You've had a good life, Patricia. He's your only son. If you're not willing to sacrifice for him, then what does that say about you? Selfish." She didn't say the word outright, but it hung in the air. My throat closed. I wanted to shout, to demand answers, but guilt silenced me. And yet, the doubts only deepened. Every form Rebecca thrust at me seemed to carry more than medical consent. "For Ethan's future," she said smoothly, sliding the will papers toward me, her manicured finger tapping where she wanted my signature. "Just to make sure everything stays secure." I stared at those papers, the ink swimming before my eyes. She had framed it as protection for Ethan, but I knew better. Protection didn't come with so much urgency, so much secrecy. At night, Ethan's fear returned to me like a whisper. The deed's safe. I thought of the drawer in David's study, the unsigned loan papers hidden under magazines. Debt, deceit, desperation, all of it circling closer around me. One evening, as I sat by David's bedside, he finally spoke. His voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. "Mum, I'm sorry." I froze. My hand tightened around his. "For what, love?" He swallowed, avoiding my gaze again. "For putting you through this." Before I could press him further, Rebecca swept in, all perfume and authority, breaking the moment apart. "Don't tire him with questions," she snapped. "He needs rest," but I'd seen it, the flicker of something in his eyes. Guilt? Or surrender? The breaking point came late one night. I had dozed off in the hospital chair when I felt a tug at my sleeve. Startled, I looked up to find Ethan standing there in his pajamas, hair mussed, eyes wide with fear. "Grandma," he whispered urgently, "you can't do it. Please." My heart clenched. "Ethan, sweetheart, you shouldn't be here. How did you—" I snuck in. "I had to tell you. Mum's lying. She keeps saying once you've done it, everything will be safe. But it's not about Daddy getting better. It's about the house, about you." I pulled him into my lap, my hands trembling as I stroked his hair. "Shh, darling. It's all right. You're safe with me." But inside, I wasn't safe at all. The walls of the hospital closed in. I could feel Rebecca's shadow stretching over us, her words, her pressure, her threats. The surgery wasn't just about saving David, it was about stripping me of everything I had left, my body, my home, my legacy. When Ethan slipped back out the way he had come, I sat there shaking, clutching the locket so tightly the metal dug into my palm. My late husband's gift, the one piece of truth I still trusted. "Guide me," I whispered into the empty room. "Tell me what to do." The conflict inside me was unbearable. Every instinct screamed betrayal, yet the love for my son held me captive. Was David complicit, or just too weak to resist Rebecca's control? Was I protecting him or walking willingly into his wife's trap? By the time dawn broke, I knew one thing with certainty. This wasn't just about life or death anymore. It was about trust, legacy, and the fragile bond between a mother and her son. And if I made the wrong choice, I wouldn't just lose a kidney. I would lose everything. The room smelled of antiseptic, sharp and clinical, as if nothing human could survive there. My body was strapped lightly to the operating table, the cold steel pressing into my back. The lights above me glared like interrogators, forcing my eyes open even when I wanted to close them forever. A nurse adjusted the IV line, the drip sliding into my vein with a cold sting. The anesthetist leaned close, his voice smooth and practiced. "Breathe deeply, Patricia. You'll be asleep before you know it." My chest tightened. Each beep of the monitor beside me was a hammer pounding against my skull. Through the glass, I caught sight of Rebecca. Her arms were folded, her lips pursed into that familiar thin smile, as though she were already victorious. Her parents hovered nearby, nodding, whispering, their eyes darting between her and the papers clutched in her hand. I gripped my locket, its silver edges biting into my palm. My husband's gift, my anchor. "Guide me," I prayed silently. And then, chaos. The door slammed open, the sound ricocheting off the sterile walls. Small footsteps pounded toward me. "Grandma," Ethan's voice split the air. "Don't do it." The entire room froze. The nurse halted with the mask hovering above my face. The surgeon's gloved hands stiffened mid-reach. Rebecca spun around, eyes wide, fury flashing across her face. Ethan's cheeks were flushed, his chest heaving. His small hands balled into fists as he shouted, louder this time, "Dad doesn't need it because he's sick from nothing else. He ruined himself, drinking, gambling. And Mum said, once you're done, we'll have the house too." The silence was deafening. Every head turned toward him. My heart lurched, as though his words had jolted it back to life. The surgeon glanced at the anesthetist, then at me. "Is this true?" he asked sharply, his voice cutting through the stunned quiet. Rebecca stormed forward, grabbing Ethan's arm. "He's a child. He doesn't know what he's saying." But Ethan twisted free, tears streaming down his face. "I heard you, Mum. You told Dad it's the only way to clear his debts. You said Grandma's house would make us safe." The air crackled with tension. I felt myself trembling, though not from fear anymore, from a strength I thought I had lost. "Stop this nonsense," Rebecca snapped, glaring at me as if daring me to contradict her. "He's delirious. Patricia, don't let him confuse you. Your son is dying. This is your chance to save him." The surgeon frowned. "Mrs. Wilson," he said carefully, "if there are questions about consent, about the circumstances, we cannot proceed." Rebecca's face flushed crimson. "She's his mother." "Of course she consents. What kind of mother wouldn't?" My voice, when it finally came, was weak but steady. "A mother who's been lied to." Rebecca's head whipped toward me, eyes narrowing into slits. I swallowed hard, forcing myself upright despite the straps. "I'll save my son's life," I said, each word deliberate, "but not his lies, not your greed." David stirred in the bed across the room, his voice raw and broken. "Mum." All eyes turned to him. His face was ashen, his lips trembling. Tears slid down his cheeks. "It's true," he whispered. "I did this to myself. The drinking, the nights at the casino. I let it happen." Rebecca spun on him, her voice dripping venom. "David, shut up. Do you want to ruin everything?" But he shook his head, covering his face with his hands. "I can't hide it anymore. I dragged us into debt. I forged papers. I told them you'd sign, Mum. I let Rebecca push you, all because I couldn't face the shame." A gasp rippled through the room. The surgeon's stern expression hardened further. Nurses exchanged glances, hands frozen over instruments. Rebecca exploded, her composure shattering. "You're pathetic," she screamed at David. "I carried you through this mess, and this was the plan, the only way. Without her house, without her signature, we're finished." Her voice echoed off the sterile walls, shrill and furious. She lunged toward me, but a nurse stepped between us, holding her back. I held up my locket, the silver glinting under the lights. My husband's face, frozen in the tiny photograph inside, stared back at me. You think you can strip me of everything? My body, my home, my dignity? My voice shook, but it carried through the room. No. You've taken enough. I will not give you my life too. Rebecca thrashed against the nurse's grip. You selfish old woman. After everything I've done to keep this family afloat, you'd rather let him rot than sign a piece of paper? I stared straight into her eyes. I'll help my son as his mother, not as your victim. I'll fight for his care, but I won't sacrifice truth. I won't hand you the home I built with my husband's sweat and tears. David sobbed into his hands, his shoulders shaking. Mum, I'm sorry. I never meant. You broke my heart, David, I whispered, tears stinging my eyes. But I still love you. Enough to want you to live, not enough to feed your lies. The surgeon cleared his throat. We cannot proceed under these conditions. The consent is invalid if coercion or deception is involved. We need to step back. Rebecca let out a guttural scream, jerking free of the nurse's hold. She slammed her fists against the glass, the sound reverberating through the room. You'll regret this, Patricia. You'll regret it. But I lay back, my grip tightening around the locket, my pulse steadier now than it had been in weeks. For the first time, I felt the suffocating weight lift. The truth was ugly, but it was mine. David wept openly, his body shaking with shame. Ethan climbed onto the chair beside me, his small hand slipping into mine. I told you, Grandma, he whispered. I couldn't let them hurt you. I kissed the top of his head, my tears falling into his hair. You saved me, Ethan. You saved us both. The room gradually emptied, the surgeons, the nurses, the orderlies, all murmuring about protocols and postponed operations. Rebecca's voice still rang faintly down the corridor, a storm of fury echoing as security pulled her away. But inside the operating theater, there was only silence. Silence, and the steady beat of the monitor beside me, no longer a hammer but a rhythm of survival. And as I lay there, clutching the locket against my chest, I knew I had reclaimed my dignity. My body was still mine, my home was still mine. And the truth, no matter how painful, was finally in the light. The surgery was postponed indefinitely. The moment the anesthetist set the mask aside and the surgeon removed his gloves, I knew the tide had turned, not in Rebecca's favor and not even fully in David's, but in mine. For once, the truth had cut through the performance. Within hours, the hospital's legal team was involved. They asked questions with quiet precision, their eyes sharp as they spread documents across a table. The forged signatures, the rushed consents, the contradictions between medical urgency and David's actual prognosis. It was all laid bare. Rebecca tried to bluster her way through, claiming misunderstanding, confusion, stress. But the evidence spoke louder than her words. Her reputation collapsed before my eyes. Nurses whispered in corridors. Her parents avoided meeting anyone's gaze. By the end of the week, Rebecca stopped showing up altogether. Whatever loyalty she had claimed was nothing more than a mask. Without the promise of financial gain, without my house and my will, she had no reason to stay. David, meanwhile, had no choice but to face his reality. His kidneys were failing, yes, but his condition was not the sudden, urgent crisis Rebecca had painted. It was years of reckless drinking and gambling catching up with him. The doctors placed him on the official donor list, where he would wait his turn like everyone else. No shortcuts, no manipulation. It broke me to see him hunched in that bed, shoulders caved in under the weight of shame. But this time, I couldn't carry it for him. He had to feel it. He had to learn. Back home, I opened the drawer where my will papers rested, untouched. Safe. My locket rested against my chest, warm with meaning. My husband's love, my legacy, my dignity, all still mine. Ethan climbed into my lap one evening, his small arms wrapped tightly around my waist. Thank you for listening to me, Grandma, he whispered into my shoulder. Tears filled my eyes as I kissed his hair. You were braver than all of us, Ethan. You saved me when I couldn't save myself. The poetic justice was simple, almost quiet. Rebecca vanished when the money dried up. David was left alone with his debts and his illness, stripped of the woman who had manipulated him, but also of the shield she had provided. He had to confront the wreckage he had created. And me? I had peace again. Not because everything was fixed, but because I had chosen truth over fear. I had drawn a line and reclaimed what mattered most, my dignity, my home, and my place as Ethan's grandmother, still strong, still present. As I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, sunlight streaming through the curtains, I realized that survival isn't always about organs or bodies. Sometimes it's about saying no. It's about refusing to be consumed, even by those we love. For the first time in months, I slept through the night, my locket resting against my heart, my legacy intact. If you've listened this far, then you've walked every step of this journey with me. And maybe you understand the hardest truth I had to face, that love shouldn't blind us to lies. I nearly gave away my life, my kidney, my home, my future, because I couldn't bear to see my son suffer. That's what a mother's heart does. But dignity means knowing when to say no, even to your own children, especially when saying yes would mean losing yourself completely. I look back now and feel a strange mix of grief and gratitude. Grief for the son I raised, who stumbled so far into weakness and deception. Gratitude for the grandson who carried more courage in his small frame than most adults ever will. Ethan's voice, breaking through those sterile walls, saved me. He reminded me that truth has a sound that can't be silenced. So I ask you, what would you have done in my place? Would you have signed it all away, given your child everything, even if it meant losing your own dignity? Or would you have stood your ground, even as it broke your heart? Tell me in the comments. I want to know how you see it. And if my story touched you, if it made you pause, made you question, please like this video, subscribe, and share it. Let it travel further than Rebecca's lies ever could. Because in the end, truth deserves to be heard.